Greetings, Internet friends. Welcome to another episode of the Synergy Cafe online show, featuring speaker, entertainer, close-up illusionist, and marketing alchemist, MagicBrad. It's the Internet lifestyle show about career, finance, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. We're moving the online chatter over to real-life activity. And now, please welcome your host of Synergy Cafe, MagicBrad.
Boom, boom. Well, there was a train. I'm a little late because there was a train. I had to wait for a train. I was going to just blast right through it, but it was a big freight train, and I thought, I'm not going to compete. So let's go find my friend George. He's in the green room somewhere. George, where are you?
I'm right here.
There
Right where you left.
Good day. Sorry I was a little late. I was at the coffee shop, and on the way back, there was a train.
Was there a train that got in your way? Was there a train crash, or was it what was going on there?
There could have been a crash if I decided to go through, but I decided to wait.
Smart man.
Patient.
Very smart man.
Yes. Watch this.
Whoa.
Yeah, that
Perception.
worked. We changed things. And then here's my new Rocky impersonation. Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. How you doing?
I'm fantastic, man. It's great to see you. I'm excited for Monday to talk about just the world we live in, the ideas of perception, hypnosis, and magic. I think all those things run their course through each one of us every day.
You know, it does. And my little title thing had something to do with, is it the truth kind of like thing that you can be deceived and you think that it's the truth. So then you just assume that it is. And I had a situation on TikTok today at the coffee shop. I was doing a TikTok thing and somebody got very creative. What they did is they put a graphic in their TikTok profile. Instead of a photograph like your face, it said like profile warning. So it looked like it was a warning from TikTok. And then it had a little thing in the name. It said something like restriction. And then it said something about your account will be closed if you don't discontinue this live within 15 minutes.
Wow.
It wasn't TikTok. It was a hacker that was using creative ways, because the way TikTok works is you got a username and then you got your name and then you can put a profile photo in. And somehow they had the time to try and figure out how to put that in there. And then it looked like, I thought, what did I do? What did I do wrong now? I didn't do anything. I was just talking. But it wasn't TikTok. It was a hacker doing weird stuff. So it helps. If you are conscious of the magic that's going on behind the scenes, what you see might not be the truth. Even though you believe it is, it might not be the truth.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I would stack on top of that the way in which most people find themselves victims of scams is because they want on some level, they want to believe that the thing they're looking at is true. You know, if there's a Nigerian prince that's offering you millions of dollars, man, it sure would be nice to have that millions of dollars, especially if you're having tough times with your family, especially if your mortgage is due, especially if you're falling on difficult times and you've been asking the question, why me? And then all of a sudden this good news shows up. Like, you want to believe that. And so I think that there's a part to magic, or there's a part to persuasion or critical thinking or a lack thereof that has to do with our intentions. What do you think?
Absolutely. It is that thing that you want to believe it. I mean, they say it like in marketing that customers, they buy from emotion and they justify with logic. So that's what ends up happening. That's how the timeshare people get you. They come in there and they say, oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's just, there's no commitment or anything, but isn't it beautiful, that pine tree, the palm tree, and the waves crashing against the rocks? And isn't it beautiful here? And they get that emotion going. Just sign right here. Sign right here. This is going to be wonderful, beautiful. It's going to be a great place for you guys. And then they buy into it and find out that, oh my God, you can't get rid of these things. And the management keeps going up. And so absolutely, people want to believe these things. But I wanted to kind of get into what you're talking a lot about, the hallucinogenics and the mushrooms and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Similar kind of thing can happen there when you do this deep dive thing. Are you possibly talking to demons, or are you believing something that shouldn't be believed, or is it coming from a trusted, safe source when you're doing that consciousness stuff?
Well, it's a great point, and I think that there's a couple different camps, and let's talk about how the heightened state of awareness and hypnosis and psychology and the entities may be related. And there's definitely altered perception, there's definitely selective attention, there's time dilation, suggested hallucinations, and enhanced imagination. I think that those 5 things can go with hypnosis, magic, and the idea of a heightened state of awareness induced by a hallucinogen, a psychedelic, or an entheogen. And so I do believe that there is something there. I've had instances. I'll give you an example. I took a really high dose one time of the 85 milligrams of 4-ACO DMT. And for those who are just listening and wondering, like, what is 4-ACO DMT? It's basically a synthetic version of what's inside magic mushrooms. It's the psilocybin. It's just the technical name for it. And within about 10 minutes, everything really started changing around me noticeably. Usually on a lower dose of psychedelics, like the walls will begin breathing, like just kind of like that. But in this case, things began spinning, and it's almost like everything became pixelated. And it really began to freak me out because it was really strong. And I began going, oh, shoot, I took too much of this. So I immediately laid down, and I remember saying to myself, wow, this is a huge dose. I hope I'm going to be all right. I remember getting scared. And then out of nowhere, a booming voice just started calling to me. And it's like, why are you here? And it was the first time in my life that I have ever had an audio hallucination where there was a voice. And it wasn't like so much calling to me from another room, but it was calling me inside my head. But it was clear as a bell. It was not my voice. It was loud. It was scary. And there's something there, whether that's a manifestation of something that I am creating, whether it is some sort of, interdimensional being. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but I can tell you I had this distinct feeling of not being alone. And to this day, I believe that I was talking to the earth, a higher power, my higher version of myself. So there are different sort of entities that are there. What do you think about that?
Well, I take things to the core, to the source, and they got this thing, they call it God. Some people call it spirit. Some people call it universe. And there's something that's in the Bible that said that God gave you free will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so some people say, well, how could God let this happen? Well, God doesn't care. God gave you free will, and you can do what you want to do. If you think it's going to work, it's not going to work. So that voice, it could be the infinite omni source saying, why are you here? Now you got to answer that question. Or it might be an entity that's in your head that you made up. This is the devil saying, why are you here? Now you got to answer that question.
Yeah.
So I would say go to the source, because I don't think that the source has bad intention, because the source, the creator, is creative. So they say that God won't give you any more than you could handle, kind of thing. So you're alive, you came out okay. So maybe you're talking to the right source. Whereas if you went to something that's inside of your head, like a being that you made up in your own brain from when you're a little kid, someone that hates you, that says that you should slit your wrists and commit suicide, and or go bomb some building or something, that wasn't the source that was talking to you.
It's a great point. And maybe instead of it being an either or, it's either the God or the devil. Maybe instead of being either or, it's a both and. I think it's both of those things, right? And for me, what happened in that, the answer to why are you here is because I want to understand what is happening to me. And it came to me, this is after my son had died, and it was a really rough part of my life. It was about a year and a half after. And the voice, like the booming sound is like, why are you here? I'm like, I want to understand why these tragedies are happening in my life. And that's the question I announced out loud. Then the voice says to me, are you sure? You know, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. And then all of a sudden, like a slideshow at a laser, like a being at a 3D laserium, I just saw all these images permeate all around the room. And they were horrific images. It was people burning, children dying, people screaming. I started crying and I'm like, okay, I don't want to see anymore. Shut it off. And the voice is like, it's too late. You told me you were sure. Now you have to watch all this. And I just remember seeing these ghastly images for like, I don't know, it seemed like hours. It probably wasn't hours, but you know, back to the time dilation. I remember just sitting there crying, seeing all these people dying and like horrific images of kids and like, holy cow, I don't want to see this. But it just kept playing. And finally I got to this point where I just stopped crying and I realized these are all images of real people dying. I don't know any of them, but these are all people who have died in horrible ways. And maybe what happened to me and my kid, maybe it wasn't that bad. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's a tragedy. And
Sure.
I you know, it's a horrible thing to have a child die, but look at all these other deaths. Like, look at this person just maimed. Look at this person being kidnapped. Look at this person losing all their family. Like, as I stood and held those images in my consciousness for what seemed like hours, I went from being incredibly saddened and crying and broken to like regaining my strength and being like, okay, maybe I'm pretty fortunate here. Maybe this tragedy that happened to me is something that I can take and learn from. In fact, maybe this tragedy that happened to me, it happened to me so that I can help other people. And like that to me is what kind of puts the magic in the magic mushrooms, or the power in the entheogens, or the substance behind the beings there, is that it fundamentally changes the way you see the world.
Yeah.
And we know like the world's not trying to kill you. The world doesn't hate you. The world is a great dancer and we are just learning. And so it's like when you see things happening in the world out there, maybe it's not you. Maybe the world is trying to show you something and you haven't been paying attention. And so it seems painful to you because you've been blocking things out for so long. And I think that that's what psychedelics do. I think that they allow you to see yourself from a different perspective in a way in which you may not have seen yourself before. Maybe they're showing you how other people see you. And think about that as a gift. Imagine getting to see yourself the way other people see you. You can make some real changes in that way.
Also, you're being shown all this stuff, and you realize that what I'm going through isn't all that bad.
Yeah.
And I like to look beyond the world and more into the universe.
Yeah, it's a great
Beyond
point.
the planet, maybe there's the moon. Maybe there isn't the moon. Maybe that's all just an illusion, and we are on this flat Earth, and it's just a projection screen, like the Omni Theater, you know. But the Adam and Eve situation, you bit the apple. Now you got all this knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You find out that it isn't heaven. There's also the hell.
Yeah.
But like, I remember when my sister died, people would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
Yeah.
But what if she died and she accepted Christ as her personal Lord and Savior and she went to heaven? Why are you sorry? You know, why are you sorry that she went to heaven? Maybe the pain that I'm going through. But I look at it as, what the heck? I mean, like your situation, you were shown that, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm going to die. I'm suffering, but you're still here.
Yeah.
You seem kind of happy.
I am. I'm forever the optimist. And I think that speaks to, well, I think what you said speaks to and when I say our, I mean the collective West ideas about death. You know, we don't touch it. It's taboo. We bury our dead. We burn them. We don't even look at them. There's no ceremony. But if you look to the East or you look to indigenous cultures, there's a relationship with death.
Yeah.
You know, they never put their old people on a machine and you let a machine breathe for them. An insurance company never paid them $10,000 a day to stay in a hospital on life support. Like that was never a thing. But we, in our society, we've commodified death. We look to some of the people we love the most and see their last days where they're not even there. They're laying death on a machine. Like that is scary. We shouldn't see that. Like that is not right. That's wrong. And the only way we do it is because it's selfish. And that's why that person says, I'm sorry, because they understand death that way. I think we should be striving to see death in a way in which is beautiful. There should be a ceremony. You should have a party. You should go out the way you want to go out, but you have to have the courage to do it.
That's how they do it in Bali. It's a celebration of life. They
Right.
they celebrate it. It's a good thing. But I remember when my mom died, we had to pick out the caskets, and of course they give you 3 choices. They got this one that's very expensive, that's nice mahogany and gold and everything. Then they got this one that's uglier than sin. It looks like it was covered with denim. And then they got the middle one that's also ugly, but what are the choices? You know, I don't want the really ugly one. I'll take the kind of ugly one because I can't afford that beautiful one. Or I don't want to pay that kind of money, just bury a box. So it is a marketing thing, unfortunately, of how we ended up doing that. Same thing with like all the senior living centers. It's ridiculously expensive to stay in these places. Why don't you lower the rent a little bit? Make it a little easier.
Yeah. I think they're trying to up the rent a little bit, you know, and it's always a partnership with, you know, how many jobs does that create? When we look, if we peel back the curtain on death, like that's a pretty big industry. I mean, let's take kids, for example. Like, you know, I often wondered, this is dark, but I often wondered why my child was taken from me in the hospital while his body was still warm. Like why? And here's the first clue people get. When you go to have a baby, they automatically say, hey, we would like you to sign this piece of paper that says you can have all the cord blood. We would like to have the blood and the cord because that can help save lives. You know, and I remember thinking like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good idea. And you start researching that stuff and you realize how expensive that cord blood is. And then I started thinking, I wonder why they wanted to take my child an hour, you know, 2 hours after he died. Like why? Why did they want that body 2 hours? You know why? They want that baby's body parts. You know, people don't talk about this, but they take children who are freshly dead and they cut them up for parts. Same thing with other people. Like when you die, dude, you're getting parted out. Your heart, your liver, and that's fine if your heart can go to save somebody else. But shouldn't the people whose family, like if that's your kid, if that's your mom, shouldn't all the money go to that person? It doesn't. It gets farmed out. And like that's the dark, disgusting part of medicine that nobody talks about.
Right.
You know, and now we're back to death. And this is why it's so secret. This is why it's so taboo. This is why the insurance company's involved. Big pharma's involved. All these machines are involved. The doctors you love so much are involved. You know, and it's only you in the dark. And you know, now we're back to psychedelics.
here's one of our Facebook users. The purpose of life, selfless service to others.
Yeah.
That might be my friend Mike Wilkie. I'm not sure.
Well, it's a good point. You know, I think that the purpose of life is to understand that it's not only the selfless service to others, that you are the other. You should learn to see yourself in everyone that you see, and that'll give you a greater understanding of who you are. It'll provide you empathy. It'll take away your anger. It'll take away your rage. It'll allow you to laugh more. It'll allow you to see the humor, even the dark humor, and some of the craziest things that come your way.
It's interesting, you know, some of those movies where they've got like the Celestine Prophecy and they had the 10th insight and all that kind of stuff, that they're trying to hide those insights from people because they'll be awake.
Yeah.
Not woke, but awake. And I lose my train of thought sometimes in these things because it is a deep thing.
Yeah.
And it is a commoditized money-making deal.
All of it. And we're all guilty. I'm not saying I'm innocent of it. Like we're all playing a part in this giant machine that is, you know, we're all Sisyphus. We're all rolling the boulder up the hill. And tomorrow's going to come running down on us. It's kind of funny, you know?
Yeah, it's good that you can look at it with a sense of humor because what's the alternative? Because you could be feeling all pathetic and then start raging and starting protesting and being angry. And well, I think it's instead of protesting the commercialization of the death industry and pharmaceuticals and all that, why not just do a pivot and focus on a new world? Let's start celebrating life. Let's create a business that make some money by taking these deceased people and giving the money back to the families.
Yeah. Now we're talking.
Non-profit situation. Look, what if we created our own thing like that? Because then the insurance companies say, we're not going to support that.
Yeah.
We'll start our own insurance company.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it, is that, I think on some level, we all pass through these different stages, and anger is definitely one of them. I know I've spent a lot of time there being mad at the world and myself and the people I love, but ultimately it leads you back to the idea of all that matters and all that you really have is right now. Like, you can worry about the past, you can think about and get upset about the future, but all you have is this moment right now. What are you doing with it? Are you making sure to enhance the lives of the people around you? Are you like Mike in saying understanding your selfless service to others is what is important in the moment?
Going to the belief thing, I used to have a
Yeah.
belief that you cannot do anything about the past. You can only do something about the future.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was working with Monica, my wife, that is a dream worker and shamanism and all that kind of stuff. And she talked about recreating your past,
Mm-hmm.
because you can recreate your perception of
Sure.
what happened in the past,
Yeah.
which may now give you a new future. So it's a different way of looking at things, because I was thinking, well, you can't do nothing about the past. Yes, you can. With some therapy and understanding, you can kind of recreate your belief of what the past is. And that
Yeah.
was a better future.
It's well said. I've often, some of the most salient advice I've ever gotten in times of tragedy was along the lines of, you cannot change what happens in your life, but you and you alone get to control the meaning of that event. No one else gets to decide what the meaning of an event is for you.
Mhm.
You ever meet two people that were in a relationship and they get divorced, and there could be two similar relationships. They both get divorced, and one person says, you know what, because that happened, I'll never love again. And the other person says, you know what, because that happened, I'm going to love deeper than I've ever loved again. So it
Sure.
is perception. It's a matter of understanding, and you understanding, you create that meaning. And it's very powerful. Like, you can create meaning in your life from an event that had tragedy, and it will change your trajectory. Right? If you take, I think it was you and I who were talking that if we're on a boat in China and we chart 5 degrees one way, we're going to end up in a totally different spot than if we would have went our original course. So if you can just
Right.
change your perception just a little bit, you can end up somewhere way on a different part of the world.
Totally. You project it out 5 years,
Yeah.
you're going to be somewhere else. I don't remember who was it that said it, but I think it was a Buddhist belief that life is empty and meaningless. And people look at that. What do you mean life is empty and meaningless? That means you're in the moment. You can give it meaning, however you
Yeah.
want the meaning to be in the future. So it's empty. It's like the usefulness of a cup is in its emptiness. You can
Mm.
put in water, put in coffee, put in lemonade, put in milk. You can put whatever you want.
Yeah. I think that speaks to the world of somatic healing. The somatic healers see you as a container. They see the relationships you have as a container. And if people can just take a moment to understand this idea of relationships and containers. I heard a great quote the other day that was something along the lines of, love is a space we create for others to grow in. And if you start looking at your life like that, if you start looking at your relationships like that, like, wow, it kind of changes things a little bit. Like, oh, I'm creating this area where we can all grow together. I'm creating this space inside myself to grow as a person. I'm creating this space in my life for my daughter to grow towards me. When you start looking at things that way, all of a sudden the world around you changes. And you could argue that you change the world if you see it that way.
You definitely change your world or your
Yeah.
perspective of the world.
Yeah.
The whole thing about magic, is it real or is it fake?
Right.
Is he a trickster or is he an entertainer?
Yeah.
Is he a thief because he's going to steal my wallet? Or is he going to give it back because everybody had a few jokes and laughs and had some fun? So
Yeah.
it's a matter of perception of how a person's doing this stuff. Like, going to, like, I've never done any hallucinogenic
Right.
thing, other than when I was in grade school. I did it because I didn't know any better. Some blotter acid, which
Beautiful.
made me crazy. I didn't know what the fuck I was going on. Oh, I used the F word. Shame on me. That was from back then. I don't cuss anymore, but back then I did.
Yeah.
You've experienced some of this stuff, and
Yeah.
I look at it as, okay, that stuff is illegal.
Mhm.
But why is it illegal? Is it because people don't want us to know the truth? Or is it because some people do it recreationally and might OD and might die? Are they trying to help these people? But maybe they want to move on to a higher level and ascend, leave this earth plane and go into the astral projection of the universe. And I'm done with this physical stuff. I want to just float around like an orb.
It's interesting. I recently talked to for those who are a little bit older, people may remember the last time psychedelics were in their heyday. And there was a lot of people running around, and one of the leading people on the West Coast was a group called the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. And there's a guy right here named Ronnie and Wendy Bevan. They wrote a book called Brotherhood Hashish, and they also created the famous Orange Blotter Sunshine. And in speaking to him, they would take, for those that are listening, a normal dose of LSD is about 100 micrograms. They believed, Ronnie and Wendy believed, and so too did the Church of Eternal Brotherhood believe, that you want to take closer to 1,500 mics, which is, roughly like 15 hits. So they would take this giant amount, and that's what they believed would turn you on. And they give the account of being turned on by just being overwhelmed with this sensation of love that pins you to the ground. And I've had some really high doses. I've done doses that big, and you lose your ability to speak. If I tried to speak on a dose of LSD or an analog, it'd be like, there's no words. Like they can't get out. And that's because your brain is recreating the patterns, is flowing different through your mind. And the connections that move to Broca's area and Wernicke's area are probably finding themselves into the visual cortex or something along those lines. And so the speech patterns are interrupted. But what happens when the speech patterns are interrupted? Well, your thinking is interrupted. What happens when your thinking is interrupted? You're seeing the world in a different way. And we've already spoken about, when you see the world in a different way, it's hard to go back to seeing it the original way. There's those magician patterns, or sometimes you can look at those 3D, those 3D patterns you would look at on a wall. Like you have to squint your eyes a little bit, and then all of a sudden that 3D image pops out at you.
Sure.
I think with enough psychedelics, that's what happens to the world. All of a sudden, boom, you catch a glimpse of this 3D image in a 2D setting, and you're like, oh my God, there's a staircase in that picture, and I can follow it down just by staring at it. I think that's what happens to this world that we live in. You're given another dimension, and once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And I think high doses of psychedelics allow you to see it. And once you do, you can't unsee it.
When you go through something like that, do you suppose that, okay, you start changing, you can't talk anymore? Would you get stuck there because your brain rewires itself? Or would it be able to come down off it and then remember, okay, now I can talk again?
That's where people freak out. Like, and it helps to be around someone. If you're going to do a really high dose like that, you should probably either have done a long series of smaller doses, or you should be with someone that does do it. Because I've been in cases where I wanted to freak out because I can't talk. No one can. And you stand next to someone and you try to talk to them, but they just look at you like, oh my gosh. That's when the paranoia sets in. And, your eyes look like saucers because your pupils are completely dilated. So if you're around a bunch of people that are looking at you, it's really easy to get paranoid. It's really easy to understand you're in a state where you can't communicate. And it's really easy to panic right there. That's where you see people freaking out or fighting or running down the street all crazy. Like,
well, what's the advantage of taking macro doses versus micro doses?
Well, the in my opinion, the insights that you receive from a macro dose are vastly superior from a micro dose. A micro dose is like, you're getting to see the color blue in a slightly different hue of which you've never seen. A macro dose is getting to hear the color blue sing to you. You're getting to actually listen to the color. You're actually getting to see not only the sound, but you could taste the color blue on a macro dose. You could taste it and hear blue. Like what? One of my favorite tastes in the world is blue. Like that sounds crazy to someone, but someone who's taken a large enough dose of LSD is like, I prefer purple. They'll know exactly what you're talking about. You find yourself in a place where words fail. Language fails, but you're still able to comprehend things in a way you never have before. And that's only done on a giant macro dose.
So then it sounds like the color blue is not just visual. It's also, you can taste it, smell it, feel it, hear it. Is there something beyond that, beyond our six senses?
Yeah. I would say that it fundamentally changes the sense ratio. So right now, because the world we live in, all of us consume media with our eyes, and we've become much more of a visual culture, much more of a literate culture. Think about the alphabet for a little bit. Like, you look at the words, but you're separating those two things. It's not like in the old days where, there were great storytellers who would move from town to town and tell the story of Odysseus and tell you the myths. It's not like the Muslim culture where they have to read the whole Quran and be able to recite it from memory. That's a different type of learning. If you live in that world, you live in a different type of world. If you live in the West, you are victim of the phonetic alphabet. And the more literate we become, the more disconnected we become from spirituality. The more literate we become, the more disconnected from the planet we get. And so I think what psychedelics are doing is they're giving you back a different kind of sense ratio. Think about the poetry that used to be. If you really want to see something or listen to something beautiful, look at like the Sufi poets. Look up Rami and look up these different poetic natures that people would use to communicate. And when you read that poetry, you get a different feeling because it changes the sense ratio with which you see the world. And I think that's what's happening on those high doses. Like, if you want to taste the color blue, if you want to thoroughly understand what the color yellow sounds like, you can do it. And maybe it's not the psychedelics that are doing it. Maybe it's just changing our sense ratios. And think about like a really beautiful clock. It has these intricate gears. But if I change the teeth on that gear, it changes the way it spins everything. So you're fundamentally changing everything around you by changing the inputs, by changing the sense ratio. And I think that the high doses, I think that you could probably get to some spots with a long periodic use of micro doses. But I think it's imperative to fundamentally shift your consciousness with those large doses. And I think that that's what they do. I think they change the gears of sense ratios of all your senses forever.
Do you think that you could then get to a place where you're at this, I'll say higher level, but there is really no hierarchy to it, but you're at a different space where talking with regular people, it's like, you bore me.
Well, I don't know if you get to a spot where you're at a higher dimension, but I think you do run the risk of becoming lonely. Because imagine you seeing the world in a way that no one else does. And people start talking to you and you're like, yeah, that's complete bullshit.
I do that, but I don't really get lonely. But sometimes I wish there was somebody I could talk with. That's why I like talking with you about this deeper stuff. Because usually we're just talking about, so yeah, there's a lot of rain last week. It's like, so the fuck what? I don't care.
Yeah, isn't that sad? Like, that's the level of conversation we're at. And is that because people are afraid to offend people? Maybe that's their way of reaching out. Maybe, hey, how's the rain is someone's desperate attempt to have a deeper conversation.
I like deeper conversation. I like thinking outside of the box or without a box, and just the concept that's beyond what that duality thinking.
Right.
Beyond the past, beyond the present, beyond the future. Is there something beyond those three?
Yeah, it's called imagination.
But something you can't comprehend. Like, have you ever seen that thing where you're talking about different dimensions? Like, you got the one-dimensional world, then you got the two-dimensional world. It's like, it's like that. Then you got the three-dimensional world. So what's the fourth dimensional world? Where does that go?
Well, it's right in between. I think that what we are seeing is a five-dimensional world being projected through our three-dimensional mind. We're seeing a three-dimensional world, and it's being projected from a five-dimensional space. And that's like your sense of deja vu. That's your sense of, here's one that I was thinking about lately. Let me know what you think about this. When we talk about time traveling, have you ever had that sense of deja vu? Like, oh, I thought I did that. Okay. I believe that is a version of you coming back to tell a younger version of you there's a problem right there. And in a way, it's you communicating with yourself through time. And I think it happens when you learn something. When you learn a giant sort of lesson in your life, I think you're permitted to go, and either you get to go and tell yourself, or that's the version of your older self learning in real time. As soon as you learn a valuable lesson, then the older sense of you gets a deja vu moment. Oh, yeah, I just learned something. What is? I think that something happened. Yeah, there's a fundamental shift in your consciousness from the future that you're getting to see in your past, and it's a way of communicating with yourself. And if you just, I know that sounds like a giant concept, but it's really not. Once you begin thinking about it, it's you communicating with yourself in the past. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean that you can go back in time and help yourself overcome a problem? Like, that's fundamentally crazy, but it's beautiful. And I think it makes a lot of sense, but it is the 5D being projected on the 3D. What do you think?
It's the shifting of the, like, you have a belief that you kind of etched into whatever the past was, and then you have this aha moment, like that situation with me and my parents would abandon me.
Yes.
They would go to the bar, and I'm thinking I'm being abandoned.
Right.
And when I have a different thought, I went through some therapy and figured out that forgive them, for they know not what they do. They were alcoholic and they were just going to have a good time. They didn't maliciously try to abandon me. And now I have a different perspective on what it was. So now there's that healing, but that couldn't come out of me focusing on the past, looking at the present, because I'm pissed off because they abandoned me, and my future is going to suck because I got abandoned.
Yeah.
I shifted into another dimension, and I tweaked that. And like you popped up because of, I believe in serendipity and coincidence. Some people say there are no coincidences, but I say everything's a coincidence. It's hyphenated. It's two incidences, coincidence. It's something happening at the same time. So I've been going through, I'm not having like a second midlife crisis or anything like that, but I'm trying to discover what is this new thing that I'm searching for. And I was thinking, God, I wonder if I should do this ayahuasca thing in Costa Rica, but I don't know about doing that kind of stuff. And I started pondering all these things. And then all of a sudden, this dude from StreamYard pops into my consciousness.
Yeah.
And now you're here. And then I don't know if I told you, but someone connected with me that they're starting to teach people about plant medicine and microdosing and things. All of a sudden, they popped in from nowhere. So how does this stuff pop in? I could just ignore it and be stubborn and say I've got an event to produce.
Right.
Or I could go, what the heck was that?
Yeah.
At least listen to it.
There you go.
I run into a lot of those situations when I got my earbuds in. I'm just listening to a YouTube video and I'm typing. All of a sudden, the YouTube video say something like search engine optimization. It's the same time I'm typing in search engine up. I just heard it and I'm typing it same time. What the hell is that? And then all of a sudden, Monica will go, do you know anything about SEO? There's all these things happening. So there's something I should be paying attention to. Loud and clear.
Yeah. I think that is beginning to happen more and more to more and more people. If you listen to that voice, whether it's coming from inside you or whether it's the planet talking to you or maybe it's God talking to you, however people want to describe it, it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that people become aware of this other thing that's happening. It's this thing like there's something telling you SEO. Like there's no way you would be typing, hear it in the earbuds, hear your wife say it. Like that is the world talking to you.
Sure, you're coming into a resonance. Everything vibrate at the same frequency.
Yeah, and you must believe it, listen to it, do it. Your life will get better. Like I'm here to tell everybody that the world is talking to you. You listening to this right now, Mike, right now, I guarantee you're going to start hearing this voice, whether it's a real voice or whether it is a sound or it is something you notice or it's your cat standing over the book that says American establishment, whatever it is, the world's trying to get your attention. And if you start paying attention to the world trying to get your attention, the world will become more attentive to you. You know, I believe that with my whole heart. Like I've started living my life in this way where I'm paying attention to the sound that's trying to get it. I've started paying attention to this voice and my life has become infinitely better. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I do know my life's going to be better.
Walking down the street and all of a sudden you start smelling smoke. And then you're walking along and you feel on your arm, it feels warmer.
Yeah.
And you start hearing like fire crackling, and I can hear that. You turn around, there's a blazing fire behind you. It could save your life if you pay attention to your senses. You might just have this feeling that something's going on.
Yeah.
instead of time altogether and be ready, whether it be good or bad. It might save you, it might help you.
Yeah. I
Oh, we
think
get
there's a
into
lot of
some
truth
good
to that.
stuff. This is much more fun than talking about the weather.
Yeah, well, in a way, if we tie it back to weather, there's an interesting quote that says, "All of us in life are either coming out of a storm, we're in a storm, or we're going into a storm."
Mhm.
So, it's something to think about when we think about the weather. It's part of life. It's part of becoming the best version of ourselves. It's part of understanding authenticity. And the same way that a virus is an upgrade, so too is every day of your life challenging for a reason.
Well, business people could use that too if they look at the changes of the seasons and know when to
Yeah.
plant your seeds. Maybe you shouldn't be doing lead generation in February because it's not a good time to be gathering seeds in February. You probably should have did that in October.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So what are the seasons of business? I don't know about that.
Well, I think it depends on the business.
Okay.
Like if someone has we'll use a seasonal business. If there's somebody that has a snowmobile business, maybe the best time to be, you know, doing your marketing is more before the snow flies
Yeah.
because people are going to start thinking about buying one of those things. And maybe you should be liquidating stuff after the snow flew.
Yeah.
So just knowing when you're going to be doing that stuff. So it depends on the business, I think, whether it's a seasonal type business. Some businesses might be year round. Like you'd think that something like real estate would be anytime, but
Mm.
people sometimes don't like moving in the winter time. They want to wait until the spring. So maybe if you want, you could move to the warmer weather or something. So you could be doing business 365 or something.
Yeah. It's a great point. You know what? Let me ask you this. Let me shift gears for a minute here, Brad. What are you paying to what concerns you most about the world we live in today?
Do you want to get a little less vague?
Well, I was purposely vague, because it's a very difficult question. I was thinking about it too. And like someone
This
I
is
was
what
reading, yeah.
concerns me most is like
Okay.
what we're talking about right now. A lot of
Okay.
people believe the stuff that they see on the internet because we use this phone, to get all of our news and
Yeah.
information. Is it possible that that news is being created by someone that doesn't know any better? So, and it's a one-on-one. I mean, like right now, Mike is on here. He's probably in a room all by himself watching us. Should he believe what we're saying? I say no. Go inside and figure it out for yourself. Don't just believe that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden have this conspiracy with China and they're trying to take over the world and George Soros is trying. Don't just believe that stuff. Look into it. And on that note, I try and look at stuff. Okay, you got the Hunter Biden and I'm not political about it, but there's this weird thing that I see all this stuff about the Ukraine.
Yeah.
There's all these strange things going on with China, China, China. Why is it China? How come it's not Jamaica?
Right.
There's all these weird things, this TikTok platform. So there's something there. But don't just listen to Joe Rogan or all those other people that are on the internet. Dig deeper, connect with yourself, listen to you, and have a conversation with God, if you believe in God. Have a conversation with the universe and find out what are these coincidental things. So that's the thing that kind of bothers me is these people that are going down this path and they're saying this is the rule. We've got to have the magic mushroom should be illegal. They're bad for people. How do you know? So that's what I think is something that people should think about is, are you really learning the truth or are you making something up and you're calling it the truth? Because I think a lot of people are programmed. I mean, that's kind of happened since we were a little kid. We went to grade school. The bell rings like Pavlov's dog, and you go in there, you grab your books, and you put them in your locker, and ding, ding. Now you got to go there, and it's lunch, and you go to your breaks, and then you get out of school, and you go to the job, and you're supposed to punch in at 7 o'clock. Ding, ding. Here's your break time. Ding, ding. Now it's lunchtime. Ding, ding. Okay, you lost your job. Now you're going to retire at 65 years old. Who says?
Yeah. You know, I love the question that you asked. How do you know? Like that's a fundamental question everybody should be asking, not only themselves, but they should be asking that in the back of their mind when they have conversations. I got a picture of Socrates on my arm. I don't know if you guys can see it over here. I can't really.
Okay.
Why is my camera angle?
I believe
Maybe
you.
this way. There we go.
There you go.
And so my daughter asked me, Dad, why did you get Socrates? And he always asks the question, is that true? So every time I look at my arm, I'm forced to ask the question, is that true? And I think if people do that, if you just ask that question in your mind, it's so freeing because you could be having a conversation with someone. I have done this before. I'm like, this person's a big dummy. And then I'm like, is that true? And I'm like, no, maybe I'm the big dummy. Or maybe what they're saying is not true, so I don't even have to worry about it. Maybe I don't even have to pay any attention to it. And I think that question, is that true? Or the one that you posed, how do you know? I think if you just ask those two questions, if you're being entertained by the television, how do you know? It makes the world funnier, you know?
Well, the is it true thing, to me, truth ends up changing with environment and with perception of things.
Sure.
Like when I was walking down Venice Beach and that guy disappeared. Did he really disappear? Was that true? No, it wasn't. But in the moment, it was true. So you will believe things. You'll believe things to be true. To me, the only truth is I am. And people will say, well, how do you know you are? I said, because I am. I think, therefore I am. I have this consciousness thing going on. I don't know in what form. I don't know if I'm 5'6" and 160 pounds and I'm a straight white male. I don't know that. I just know I am.
Right.
And that's probably when you get into this psychedelic stuff, you get into a deeper thing and you find out that I am much bigger. Like I'll tell a quick little story.
Yeah, it's a long one.
We've only gone for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I was in Bali, Indonesia, which is a pretty spiritual place. And my friends were getting ready because we were going to go out to dinner. And there's this other woman that was over there. She's from Madrid, Spain. She didn't speak real good English. And she was writing a book about aliens, which is bizarre, weird. And we're sitting there having a conversation. And all of a sudden, I was gone. The only way I can describe it is I was like an orb with her. And we were flying through the universe. So I didn't have any physical form, really. I just had a being. There wasn't really any dimension. It was like the orb thing was a spectrum, if you will. And I said, where are we going? And she goes, where do you want to go? And I was like, I don't know where to go. But we just kind of flew around. And then I said, when are we going back? She goes, when do you want to go back? It was all up to me. And then we came back and I see her sitting there across the way. I don't know if it was 5 minutes or an hour. It was the weirdest feeling, but it was an out of body experience. So I don't know why I told you that, but it was one of those things where I am. I didn't disappear. I still was. I just wasn't in my physical space, in my physical body at this place in Ubud, Bali, Indonesia, with this other being. I was somewhere else. I don't know where. It was a weird feeling. I wasn't doing any drugs or anything either. I was just straight.
That sounds a lot like a psychedelic experience, you know, and maybe a psychedelic experience is just a heightened spiritual experience.
I believe that kind of thing, because I think when you ingest this stuff, it disrupts those patterns, those traditional beliefs you have. And now you're out in the cosmos and you start seeing everything, the fire-breathing dragons and the demons with the horns. And nothing is really dangerous. You can talk to the demon with the horns and you can say, go that way. There's really good coffee down there.
Yeah.
Thanks, bud.
Yeah, he might turn into the coffee. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's a great way. It's a great way to, you know, sometimes if we take it back to the way in which we are communicated to today, whether it's going to school and being conditioned like a Pavlovian dog, whether it is, you know, turning on the Drudge Report and reading 25 headlines and getting your dose of propaganda for the day, whether it is whatever it is, you know, it seems to me that we have blinders on the same way they put them on the horse to run around the track 20 times to win a race. So too are we we have our own blinders on, and we go to work and we run around this track. But sometimes those blinders are ripped off, be it traveling. Traveling seems to be a way in which we're introduced or reintroduced into the world which we love. Psychedelics are another way of it. Whenever we change the state of consciousness, we're reintroduced into the environment that we're part of. And I think that that is something to think about. Like, you can change the way you see the world by getting out of your own way, by taking the blinders off, by going outside and going for a walk, by traveling, by sitting in quiet darkness, by meditating, by thinking, by being alone. There's so many ways, by breath work. There's so many different ways to see the world around you in a different state of consciousness. And I think that people are doing that. And that's why you're seeing the push to fear. Hey, we're all going to die. There's going to be a nuclear war. China's coming in. Jesus, the economy is going to collapse. Like, there's this never-ending campaign of fear porn out there, because fear narrows the way you see the world. It puts you into a hyper focus. Like, okay, I got to go to work today. I got to get this thing done. No, you don't. You don't have to go to work today. You don't have to get that thing done. You don't have to go work for somebody else. You are the most creative person that you know. And when you start fueling that, when you start believing it, the creation will pour out of you. When you think about why we're here on this earth, God or this world put us here to recreate. That word is also known as recreation. Recreate, recreation. When you're creating, you feel alive. When you're creating, you have purpose in life. When you're creating, you're making the world better. When you get up and you go slave for somebody else, all you're doing is making that person in charge of that thing better. And the people that are in positions of authority, they want everyone to work for them. They want everyone to be a slave. Like, they want to keep the world the way it was. But just like all births, we have to find and fight our way through the birth canal. We have to fight and find our way to becoming our own person. That's the cycles of life. And that's where we are in life. We're fighting to create a better way. And everyone does that by becoming the best version of themselves. Maybe you're at this stage. Maybe you're at this stage. Maybe you're at this stage. But it doesn't matter. The fact that you're fighting to create a better version of yourself is enough. So think about that. That's my challenge to everybody. Try and become as authentic. Understand how beautiful you are. And understand it's not easy. But every day you get up and you defy the odds. Every day you get up and you do one thing that scares you. Every day you make yourself 1% better. In 10 years, in 100 days, if you make yourself 1% better, you're 100% better. And it's hard, but it's beautiful and it's fun.
There's a friend of mine, Arnie Ranson. I got introduced to him by another friend of mine, Patrick Weisman, who I'm going to meet with tomorrow. We're going to have a coffee. Nice. He's the guy that helped me through the breathwork dealie. But Arnie had these cards. He called them question cards. And you're familiar with affirmations where you say, I am healthy. I am a millionaire. I am confident. Yeah. There's always that little thing that says, I am healthy. And you go, well, I don't really feel that good. Yeah. Back's kind of sore. There's always that stuff going on. So Arnie created these things. He calls them question cards, where it doesn't say I am. It says, why am I? Why am I healthy? Well, I'm not in a wheelchair. Yeah. That's a good thing. Yeah. Why am I a millionaire? Because I go in my bank account, I don't see $1 million. Yeah, but I have these ideas that are worth millions. If I can just change these. So it makes your brain think differently than being stuck in that box. It immediately gives you that. It's kind of like meditation, where they say you're supposed to concentrate on your breath. You wonder, what do you mean talking on my breath? It's because that way at least you're focusing on one thing rather than thinking about my breath and that fly that landed on my shoulder and the clock is ticking. Yeah. I hear the cars going by. You got all that noise. If you can just focus on one thing and say, why am I? Yes. Or Emerson's 6 friends, the who, what, where, when, how, and why. Who am I? Where am I? How am I? Why am I? Where am I? When am I? It's a good one. Yeah, I think it speaks to the idea of boundaries and patterns. A lot of people's patterns is get up, drop your kids off at school, go to work, come home, get up, drop your kids off at school. People get in these patterns. Oh, they do an alarm clock, for crying out loud.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and pretty soon, if you don't check yourself, you just become the pattern, and it's easy to slip into patterns, But I think different states of consciousness, be it breath work or psychedelics, they break down patterns, or more, maybe it's a better way to say it is they break down boundaries. And that's what authority is afraid of as well. Is like, hey, we have carved out these nice little boundaries for everybody to stay in. As long as everybody stays in their boundaries, there's no problems. But what if you don't like your pattern? What if you don't like your boundary? Like, you got to change it. Otherwise, you live a life that's not worth living. And
I don't
that's
like
the worst
stopping at
thing.
stop signs when there's nobody around.
Well, you can try to break that pattern. You probably get away with it for a while, but as long as you understand the consequences, I think you're free to break those boundaries. You can't just break boundaries without understanding there's not going to be problems. And it's a great point, because we have our natural stop signs. We have our own natural stop lights. Hey, if I quit this job, guess what? I might not be able to support my family. That's a stop sign. That's a red light. What if you do it anyway? Well, look, you did it. You might not get paid for a while, but guess what? You got further down the road.
Again, I'm
further up the hill.
hybrid kind of guy. Like, I got this job, but I'm going to do a side hustle because I don't want this job.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it too. Sometimes, you're Cortez and you burn the boats. Sometimes you take over the system from the inside.
I don't like the idea of burning the boats.
Why not?
Because just in case I wanted the boat. What if I burn the boat and then I got on the island and go, oh my God, this is a beautiful place. I'm going to go get my friends so we can have a party. There's no boat. Shit, I can build a boat.
Yeah.
Well, I can say docking the boat and saying I'm not going there anymore. It's kind of like drinking. I quit drinking.
Okay, you burn the boat.
I don't drink anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the boat's still there.
Mm.
He's not going to use it. See what I'm saying?
But isn't that kind of the safety net though? Like, listen, the booze is still there. I could drink it. What if you just got rid of it?
I know, but I'm more powerful now.
That's true. That's a good association.
I can have the alcohol right next to me. I just don't do that.
Right.
So what if somebody else wants to drink the beer, go ahead. That's your thing.
That's true.
Like, if you want to take my boat that I didn't burn, you can use the boat. I'm just not going to use it anymore.
Yeah, it's a good point. Give it away.
Yeah, I'm going to stand. Yeah, don't destroy the boat. If I needed to build a fire to make marshmallows and hot dogs, I'd probably burn a boat.
Yeah, it's an interesting point of view. I still think there's a time and a place for it. I think that burning your boats on some occasion forces you to make new connections.
Definitely forces you to.
Yeah.
You get me in a corner, I got to do what I got to do.
Right.
I'd help you.
Yeah.
But
it can be limiting too.
I like to have options.
Yeah, it's a good point.
It's an omnidirectional space,
It's true.
Up, down, all around.
Yeah.
Maybe the boat ends up being a house.
Since we're talking about boats, have you ever heard of Theseus' ship?
Can't even say that.
Okay, so it's like this strange paradox, and it's something along the lines of this. Like, let's say you and I, we build this giant boat.
Oops,
yeah, my cat's playing with me. So we build this giant boat, and it's all made out of wood. And inside the hull of this boat, we take all these oak barrels with us. And as we're on our trip from point A to point B, the boat begins to break down. So we take these oak barrels and we replace every plank of wood with every plank that was on a barrel. And by the time we get from A to B, not a single piece of the boat we left with is on there. It's all been replaced by the same wood that was in the hull. So is that boat the same boat we left in, or is it a new boat?
Gee, I don't know. It's
a tricky one, right?
It's a good question. I guess if it's all replaced, it's a new boat. What did you do with the wood? Do you make barrels out of it?
Whatever we wanted to.
Well, as soon as you said that, I just thought about the journey, and everything is nothing is static. Like, that's why I don't believe that balance happens. Harmony happens, but balance doesn't. Balance, you got to have some kind of rigidity to keep it there, because everything's always moving, like the boat. So, when you first got the rotten wood and you get the rotten wood out, you got to take the oak barrel and you got to replace it. It's still the same boat with a little bit of new boat. And as you go along, pretty soon you got all the oak barrels are gone. And you get to the harbor and they go, so where's our oak barrels?
You're standing on them.
We ordered barrels, not a boat.
Yeah. 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 It's an interesting one to think about.
It is. Wow, we did an hour, dude.
Yeah, it flies by. You know,
Yeah, it does.
good conversations do that.
Because this gets into some deep stuff rather than that surfacey stuff. You know, I like doing these better than like when I interview people and they're talking about their book and there's a, you know, you get my book free if you opt in here, and then I know they're going to be sold into some program. And
yeah, conversations are a great part of life. And, you know, sometimes I think that deep conversations are going the way of the written letter. You know, they used to have pen pals. Now you just have an email friend or you text somebody, but there's something to be said about a nice, well-written letter. And the same goes to be said about a nice, long conversation with somebody.
well, I like the conversation because you got the ebb and the flow and the cadence and the voice and
yeah,
rather than the back and forth of, you know, like a letter, you got to mail it out with the United States Postal Service and wait 10 days for the guy to mail it back. And sometimes it's a month.
But isn't there something in that waiting? Isn't there something in the prolonged, you know, response that allows you to think about what you're going to say versus just having the immediate gratification of saying what's on your mind?
There kind of is like that. Like, you ever had a conversation with somebody and then when the conversation's over, you go, God, I wish I would have said this.
Mm-hmm. All the time.
And that's where the in the moment conversation is. You don't get a chance to say that. You should have thought about that when the moment was there. Too late now, dude.
Yeah, that's you know, I'm reminded of the phrase, I think it was from the Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities, where it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. You know, sometimes I think about that in a conversation, or if we take it back to perspective, no one will ever get to see things exactly like I do. And that's both the beauty of life and the tragedy of life. I get to see something in the way no one else will. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful and tragic at the same moment.
Well, like you mentioned that about tasting the color blue.
Yeah.
It's you see blue and I see blue. Do we both see the same color? Or do we
Probably not
agree that this color is blue?
And I think that that's the problem with everything. We have decided to agree upon things which we disagree about. You know what I mean? On everything. Green, blue, the color, the word steak, the word Anglo, the word American, everything.
How about the length of a yardstick?
Nope. I think that is the length is something that can be measured. But once you start stacking those lengths together, the more we put together, the less cohesive it becomes. Like, we can agree that an inch is an inch, and we can agree to some things that are measured, but what are we measuring? You know, we can agree on the system, but space?
Yeah, we're measuring space.
No, because you can't measure non-Euclidean space. That's the problem, is that you can measure space, but our definition of what space is, the tools we have to measure it don't work. It's like using a thermometer to check your weight. Like, space is curved, and we don't have tools to measure curved space. We
measured the distance between this and that is 3 feet. So now we both agree that that's 3 feet. That space is 3 feet. So when we use that dimension, we can build that door so the horse will fit through there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this gets us back to the part of our conversation when we talked about, you know, sense ratios, because you can measure from A to B, but you can't measure everything that's in that space from A to B. You know what I mean? Like, if I take a pot and I say, okay, if I take a round pot, and I put, okay, there's 4 inches of space in this pot, and then I put a lid on it, and then I move that pot. Is the space that we measured still where that pot was, or is it the space that's in that pot? Who owns the space in that pot? You know what I mean? Like, we can measure, we have very crude tools to measure space, very, very crude. And yet that's what we fight about, is this obtuse abstraction of measurements. That's a problem with science, is that we have all these tools to measure things. And that's the problem with psychedelics. All these scientists and pharma companies, they want to measure what's happening. You can't. You need the subjective experience in order to define what's happening. And that's the problem with science and spirituality. Like, we're trying to measure things that we can't.
The Scientologists used to say that life is solving the mystery of mass, energy, space, and time. So all time is the distance between two masses, space. And in there is energy. You following?
Well, I think you would have to, I think the problem with that is that no one has a really great working definition of time or energy. You know, those are very nebulous words. Like, ooh, this is energy, this is space.
Well, we created it. We created this thing.
Yeah, they're all, it's language. It's just words. You know, and you can, now we're back to magic. Magic spells in Hollywood.
We developed this clock, whether it be the Mayan calendar or the Gregorian calendar, that functions off the cycle of the sun and the earth and the moon and all that stuff. And we just agree that there's 24 hours in a day. We have to have this agreement, because it doesn't have to be 24 hours. We could take it and chop it up and made it into 42 hours. If you want, I just agree with it. Change it.
Why is October the 10th month when an octagon has 8 sides? Why is December Deca? You know what I mean? It's all bullshit. They changed everything. They lied to us.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't agree to that, but I'm forced to. I don't agree to it, but I'm forced to live in it. But I'm trying to not live in that. Like,
well, I've talked with Monica about creating programs around the moon cycles, the phases of the moon, rather than the Gregorian calendar, because the moon phases is sort of more of a constant than this leap year thing we got to deal with.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You know, if let me ask you, like, here's one for people to think about. What role does the shifting of the North Magnetic Pole have on our seasons? Like, no one ever asked that question. And why is it that the North Magnetic Pole is migrating faster than it has in the last 20 years than it has in the last 50? Like, what effect does that have on our weather? You know, there's a really fascinating book called History, Science or Fiction by Anatoly Fomenko. And in that book, he talks about something called parameter D. Parameter D is a series of moon eclipses that are unexplained because all of a sudden there was 700 years where this eclipse never happened. Anatoly Fomenko goes into explaining, hey, why is it that we're missing 700 years of geological information about this moon phase? So you brought up moon phases. I would highly recommend everybody check out this book. It's a series. There's 7 books. And it's by a Russian mathematician called Anatoly Fomenko. If you really want to begin to understand the problem with history.
It looks a little thick for me.
Oh, it's, you know what? Well, here's the great thing. For those who don't want to read the book, just go to my podcast channel, my YouTube channel, and you can see a series that I've done on there. I've done like the first book I'm still working through, but you know, it really gets into the ideas about history and fiction and moon phases and the astronomical charts of the Bible that talks about how we see things and how the heavens are probably the best way in which we can look at time and understand the concept of time. And it'll blow your mind. It's really fascinating to think about.
I can see some stuff like that's more digital, like the moon phases, stuff like weather. The seasons kind of, you know, winter, spring, summer, fall, but they're still kind of nebulous. Like right now, it's July here in Minneapolis. It's cold. Not cold, but it's a little chilly. It's like I got my jacket.
Okay, think about a clock, right? The clock goes in a circle like this, like, right? The same way that the heavens move through our skies, the same way that someone who really understands the stars at night can navigate the sea. They understand the cycles, right? And we have, you know, I'm not, you know, there's 2 different ideas about astronomy and astrology. But if you just think about the way in which we're in the age of Pisces, like we go around, okay, the earth spins around its axis, and we spin around the sun spins around the galaxy spins around the universe. So too do our seasons spin around our earth. Like I think you've been to South America before, and you understand that the seasons are flipped on the bottom, right?
Right.
So when we have summer, they have winter. Well,
Mhm.
doesn't it kind of make sense? Like we've already talked about the Gregorian calendar. We've already talked that they've switched October from being the 10th month to the 8th month. We've already talked about how December should be the 10th month. Okay, well, if you pan back and go, wow, we've changed the calendar a little bit.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, no wonder June doesn't feel like the middle of summer anymore. The seasons are slowly changing. Where's my
Right.
camera? The seasons are slowly changing from the summer months to the winter months. And pretty soon, probably not in our lifetime, but pretty soon, the summer months in the northern hemisphere will be what the summer months in the southern hemisphere were.
Right. We
We're
probably won't even know.
slowly changing. I'm back to the magnetic North Pole moving. What happens when that moves? Well, the seasons change. Just like the clock changes, the magnetic North Pole forces the seasons on our planet to change.
Mhm.
So you have all this hype about, hey, it's climate change. No, it's a cycle. It's a cycle. And pretty soon, December, January, and February will be the hottest months on the northern hemisphere. The same way that June, July, and August will become the hottest months in the southern hemisphere. It's a cyclical pattern, and it's
Sure.
happening in real time. But
And that
it's
makes
much
total
easier.
sense. Just like
You're
when
right.
you exhale, then you inhale. It goes both
Exactly.
ways.
Yeah.
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 I
When you-
believe that
yeah.
more than I believe that man is killing the earth with carbon.
Yeah. When I was little, we worried about pollution. When I was little, if you dump toxic gas or when you dump paint into a lake, you got in trouble. But now, if you breathe too much, you get in trouble.
When,
We've done a
when
very
I was a
crazy
kid,
thing.
we didn't give a shit.
Yeah, yeah. That's how far we've come. Maybe we're back to cycles again.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fascinating. The whole thing
yeah,
is flipping around.
yeah. It's fun to watch, and when you do begin to see it, you know, just this conversation has been psychedelic in nature. Like we've really covered a lot of ground, and I hope that other people can see it, because when you do see it, like I said, you can't unsee it, and
Mhm.
it rips away the scales, and you go, oh, that's why they're talking about China so much.
Well,
I don't want. What about everything else?
I like to go into the things that make sense to me, like when you're talking about the months.
Yeah,
It doesn't make much sense for it to be chopped into months, and that there's 12 months and there's 12 hours in a or 24 hours in a day. Half a day is 12. It doesn't really make much sense when you start looking at the moon phases and the Mayan calendar.
yeah,
Have you ever studied that?
a little bit.
I did a chart once. I went to a
Okay.
class and they had us do a chart of coloring all these things out, and they said, if you might notice, and it looked like the DNA ladder.
Yeah,
That's what the
the double helix.
yeah, exactly. So that makes more sense to me than some Greek guy going, we're going to chop this year into 12. Sounds good.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty productive thing to do.
Well,
Seems
you
like a
get to
pretty
the
good
end,
way.
and February's only got 28 days. What the hell happened there?
Yeah, I think that it just goes to show you the chutzpah of man, or the ideas that we think we can. Well, okay, here's something that people talk about too. There's two competing ideas about the world in which it's made. One is the ceramic model of the universe, and the ceramic model of the universe says God, the son of a carpenter, has come down here and he forces his will to shape the world. And you, as man, must get out there and shape yourself and shape the world around you. Like we have this idea that we're carpenters, that we're potters, and God breathes life into man, and man can create. So that's like sort of the ceramic model of the universe. And then the other model is the fully automatic model, where you didn't come into this world, you came out of it. You're part of it. The earth grows people the same way an apple tree grows apples. And in my opinion, like that's why you can never go to Mars or the moon. Like you can't, you're part of this earth. You listening to this, you're part of the earth, the same way that an apple is part of a tree. You might be able to get to Mars. You maybe could get to the moon, but you can't live there. You're not part of that planet. You're part of this planet. If you don't have this planet, you die. I don't care what kind of spacesuit you have. I don't care what kind of fancy rocket you have. You're going to die there because you're not part of that planet.
Right.
So
like the apple is part of the tree. When you pull it off and make a part of a pie, it's no longer part of a tree. And
yeah, you could theoretically make a huge slingshot and fire that apple to the moon. Theoretically. But it's dead. Can't live. There's no life there. It's not going to work. So we're already on a spaceship. We're as far out as we're going to get. It's just funny to me to think about. You cannot go to the moon the same way the ocean can't go to the moon. You can't go to Mars the same way that the national forest of the Amazon can go to the moon. Because you're the same thing. You're part of the planet. But we have these ideas that capture our imagination that are harnessed, again, to make us see the world in this very narrow view.
Do you think that possibly someday we could expand beyond the planet, just like, people were part of Europe and then they became part of the United States or America?
Yeah, I think you got to go through the sun.
There you go. That makes sense.
Well, think about it. Think about it like this. When you're born, don't you have to go to the light? When you're born, you see this giant speck of light. And have you ever seen a kid born? They're like, it's burning my eyes. When you die, you go into the light. Look at the sun. Like, no one can, like, there's some studies of people who have stared at the sun and burned their retinas. Like, you're not ready. But when you are ready, you go to the light. It just makes sense that in every cycle of life, you go to the light. Like, why can't you stare at the sun? Because that's where you're going to next, I think. Like, that's the light. That's the sun god, the son of God, the sun god. Like, I think that's what happens. I know that sounds crazy. You could burn up in the sun probably right now, but why not? You got to go into the light. So I do think we're going to move past this place. But I think when the sun, I think about a sun exploding, it becomes like a white, like you go through the sun. That's the way through is through the sun, everybody.
Okay. Now it's getting
Why not? Why
scary.
not?
I gotta send a text to Elon.
I know.
I gotta let you know. Don't go to Mars, dude. Turn your rocket over. SpaceX should be going to the sun.
Okay, just so everybody knows, Elon Musk is not going to Mars. Elon Musk is making weapons. Okay, that's what he's doing. He's not going to Mars. He ain't going to the moon. He's building weapon systems for the people to murder each other. That's what he's doing. Communication systems and weapon system. We're never going to Mars.
I haven't heard that. That sounds like a whole new podcast.
Yeah, we should do it on it. Like, the same way we went to the moon in the 60s is the way we're going to Mars now. And we're just building weapons. That's all it is. It's a way to funnel money for a private contractor to funnel everyone's taxes into a weapon system for space.
So it's a facade.
It is. It's an eclipse, a facade. It is a noble lie that we tell people so they'll get up and go to work every day and have the imagination to help build rockets. Think about it. It's not that much different than Wernher von Braun, right? Wernher von Braun, he was the greatest rocket scientist of his time. And he was the one that got us to the moon. But he was also the one that created the systems to launch the nuclear bombs. He created the V2 rocket. What has Elon done? Elon is the next manifestation of Wernher von Braun. It's just this. If we were back to cycles, we're not going to other planets. We're building giant weapons to kill each other.
And if you think about it, why do we want to go to the moon? Why do we want to go to Mars?
We can't. We don't have the technology.
Why would you want to?
Yeah.
What's wrong? There's a lot of stuff here in Fridley, Minnesota I haven't seen yet.
Why don't we're going to terraform Mars? Why don't we terraform Antarctica? It has an atmosphere. Right?
Too cold.
Yeah, but we'll go to Mars where it's even colder and there's no atmosphere. Like, it's all bullshit, man. It's all bullshit. I better let you go. Otherwise, I'll stay here and talk to you the whole time.
Well, this is good. I'm ready to do another one. I don't know if we got a next Monday scheduled. You let me know.
Yeah, let's do it.
I enjoy it.
Me too. It's fun. Thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to sign it off.
Okay.
And if you want, we can have a little chat in the back in the green room. Other than that, I'm going to sign this one off.
Okay,
I appreciate
sounds good.
you guys. That's for sure. Oop, I let him go. What was he going to say? I should go get him and find out what he's going to say because it might have been important. Hang on a sec. What were you going to say?
Watch out for the sun. No, I was going to say, check out the True Life podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending some time with me. Check out magicbrad.com. He's an amazing guy. Check me out at True Life Podcast. You can check out my link tree down below. It'll probably be in the show notes. I would love to have you come and spend more time with me as well as our time on Mondays. Thank you so much, Brad. I appreciate it.
It is truelifepodcast.media. Dun, dun, dun. Thank you, buddy. There you have it, the True Life Podcast.media. He's got a lot of stuff all over the place with his link tree and all that kind of stuff. He's got overwhelming amount of knowledge and wisdom. That's it. I'm out. Take care. Be well. Be good. Be kind. Did I say be nice? Be nice. See ya.